Hello listeners, Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
You are listening to the Nighttime Podcast.
Hello listeners. I'm not going to have a new episode of Nighttime this week, but I'm not going to leave you in the dark. I'm going to present a remastered and updated version of a prior episode. Back in 2020, my pal Jack Luna and I shared the story of Rocky Rambo Wei. He's a 25-year-old Canadian immigrant from Hong Kong who, for reasons still unknown, committed one of Vancouver's most brutal murders. Given the randomness, the viciousness, and the senselessness of Rocky Rambo's attack on an elderly couple, the most logical explanation that one expert was able to offer up at his eventual trial is that the young man's obsession with video games led to some kind of mental break that resulted in a confusion about what was happening there in Vancouver and what was happening in the fantasy world of Skyrim, the popular entry in the Elder Scrolls role-playing game series. So yeah, this is a very dark and a very weird one, so buckle up. Tonight, in this episode of Nighttime, Jack Luna and I will break down the strange story of Rocky Rambo Wei.
2 years after Rocky Rambo Wei killed the victims, Dr. Edward Shen, a clinical psychologist, spent 11 hours with the accused while he was in custody. Mr. Kam remembered that he killed Mr. and Mrs. Jones. He was not able to give an intent, said Dr. Shen. Perhaps Mr. Kam was operating in a game consciousness. Mr. Kam might have anticipated gaming consequences instead of real consequences. Dr. Shen told the court, Kam told him he was shocked when Dianna Mah-Jones screamed because characters in the video game don't scream.
Jack Luna, I'm absolutely delighted to have you on the show today. How you doing?
Good, man. I'm delighted to be here. I'm a huge fan of the Nighttime Podcast. Been one of your fans from the start, buddy.
Thanks, man. Without offending any of the more sensitive listeners, introduce yourself. Tell me a bit about you.
Without offending them, I have 2 kids. I live in the middle of nowhere, Manitoba, and have been interested in true crime my entire life. I used to be a social services worker. I drove a Zamboni for a while when I came out to live in Manitoba, and then I was listening to your podcast, listening to a few of the early ones, including True Murder with Dan Sapansky.
Nice.
And especially with that one, I was like, man, I could do this. With yours, I wasn't so much feeling that way, but with Sapansky, I was like, for sure, I could do this. So I gave it a shot, and now I've been doing it as like a kind of a full-time gig for the past 2 years. 3 years in total.
Like, I've wanted to have you on the show for a long time, and we've been talking about it for a bit, but it was just a matter of finding the right story to talk about and to tell. And I think we found something that's just like exactly what we've been looking for. It's dark, It's quirky, it's weird. It's fascinating as much as it is tragic, I suppose. So before we get into it, why don't you set us up? Like, what about the story of Rocky Rambo caught your attention? Like, what drew you into this story without getting too far into it?
You mentioned it to me first, to be completely honest. I was hip to it by you, and I look into it and I see like this young kid who, you know, he doesn't seem like he could harm a fly just by looking at him. And the interrogation tape that we will talk about later, there's a 9-hour interrogation that you can watch, and I watched quite a bit of it. I was just really compelled to by this person who was kind of slumped in his chair and giving really curt answers and not wanting to talk about it. I was like, man, he did this horrible stuff. Why is he called Rocky Rambo? Clearly, we're not seeing Rocky Rambo right now. But we will learn that he is, much more vicious than he initially seems.
Yeah. Well, I figure the best way to get through it is basically the way I see it is it's best for us to probably follow along from the point of the view of the investigators and basically tell the story that way. So the story will start on a September morning in 2017. We're in an area of a residential area of Vancouver. Again, September of 2017. It all starts with a newspaper carrier walking down a tree-lined street. The area is called Marpole, which is kind of a lot of like larger, older homes, but it's a nice area. The newspaper carrier is basically walking down the street, and as he enters a home or the front yard of a home that he's delivered newspapers to for years, what he sees on the path, like the little walkway leading up to the front door, is on one side of it is a knife, and on the other side of it is a small axe. He didn't think anything of it and just delivered the paper, but this moment in time is pinpointed as like kind of the first red flag in what's going to become a real horrific or horrible story. That newspaper carrier walks off, but shortly after, a guy by the name of Anthony Purcell, he shows up at the home where he's checking on a coworker. He works as a occupational therapist, I believe, and one of his coworkers who was supposed to be at work that morning didn't show up. He's showing up at her home to see what's going on, and he walks past that same knife and that same hatchet, not noticing it, goes to the front door and opens it to peek his head in to see if she's in there. And what he finds is basically the obvious signs of struggle, but more than that, he sees a kitchen with a floor that's just drenched in blood. Counters, cupboards, the whole thing is just splashed in blood, and that's when he does the obvious thing and leaves the home and calls the police. And that's really, I guess, where, from the investigator's point of view, where this all starts.
Yeah, it's like the beginning of a horror movie, really. And it is like a horror movie. It plays out that way in my mind. I like to just interject here real quick and talk about the knife that's laying there. And we'll talk about this later, but it's like one of those, it's like a paring knife, you know? Later on it'll be described as a pocket knife. But it's like you see it with like a kitchen set. Out here in Manitoba where I live, it would be the type of thing I would use to like cut the rod off of all the bruised fruit they leave for the people who live in Manitoba. Like it's orange, and so that is there, and then you got this hatchet covered in blood, and like you said, blood everywhere in the house when the co-worker of we'll learn her name soon, but her name is Dianna Mah-Jones. Her home with her husband, man. Go ahead. Yeah.
So after this person calls the police, any horror basically in the kitchen is just nothing compared to what they find. We learn a lot about the police officer and the investigators' kind of experience in the home, because eventually when this case goes to trial, they'll take the stand and tell a story that sounds pulled straight out of a horror movie. Basically, as they enter the home with their guns drawn, because they don't know what they're walking into, there's blood all over the kitchen floor, all over the cupboards and counters, as I already mentioned. They also see drag marks and bloody footprints, basically signs showing that someone was dragged out of the kitchen and upstairs into the second floor. As the police start walking up to the second floor to see what's going on, they can hear the sound of running water, and the whole area is just full of steam, almost like walking up into a smoky room. It's just very steamy. When they peek their head around the corner, they see the bathroom door open, and they can hear that it's the shower running. And obviously that's where the steam's coming from. But when they enter the bathroom and get a peek in the shower stall, what they see is the two bodies of the two elderly victims, the hot water running, again, just basically feeding a steam bath that encompass the second level story of the home. And
right.
And to say it's their bodies without even getting into the results of the autopsy or what they found, it was the deceased male, Mah-Jones's husband. He had 103 stab wounds alongside hatchet wounds to the throat. And Mah-Jones similarly was gravely injured. She was deceased with a wound to her neck, basically. Right. Her throat had been sliced. So we're talking about like an absolutely barbaric, brutal murder.
Yeah, a murder that I actually had a nightmare about a couple of days ago. So Dianna Mah-Jones, 65, and Richard Jones, her husband, he used a walker to get around, 68 years old. After learning about this, I had a nightmare about it, man. And here's what it was. It was about the situation you just described, but I was like an investigator, and I was walking up and I could hear the water running, and there was the steam as you mentioned, and I come in And that shower stall is full of water, and there's two bodies bobbing in it. And it's like the killer had flex sealed the the seals and made it into like a Harry Houdini dunk tank, and the bodies was floating in it, man. I had that nightmare. Like, what a horrific scene in general, just the way it was.
I could see why the vision would stick with you, because it's such a visual kind of thing. Like I picture like the steam and all that, and what the investigators must have been thinking when they found this. And it's absolutely brutal. And at the time, it was a mystery. They had no idea who did this. There was no evidence to suggest a robbery. However, the one kind of glaring clue was that their vehicle was missing. And almost as soon as this leaked in the press that this double murder had happened in this area, at the same time, also along with those articles, was photos of the vehicle, basically saying, like, if you could see this, if you find this vehicle, let us know. And that's really how it started. Was the investigation was, we found these two deceased people and their vehicle's missing. Along with those articles, as the press does, every couple hours a new article would come up with a new paragraph about the victims. But we learned quite a bit about them in the days after their bodies being found. Again, 65-year-old Dianna Mah-Jones and her husband, Richard, 68. I've seen him referred to as disabled in several articles, but I've never seen described what his story was, other than he used a walker to get around and wasn't employed. But as a 68-year-old man, that doesn't seem out of the ordinary. But maybe there's more to it. But with the female, Dianna Mah-Jones, she was still working, very active. She was an occupational therapist and a well-respected one. She'd worked with the health authority for 35 years and was basically seen as a bit of a rock star in her industry. She's received all sorts of awards, was known for being able to basically like improvise and almost like design equipment on the go or on the fly in her job. She was like kind of like a bit of a wizard with this stuff. And if you Google her name, you'll find articles about the crime that ended her life, but you'll also find articles during her life basically applauding her role as an occupational therapist. So it was definitely somebody who was successful and active in the community that was just plucked from existence due to this, horrible crime. But the early news stories are really, really troubling as you kind of see this unfold.
Definitely. Like you said, he was he had a walker. He was a retired guy, I assume. I couldn't even find what his occupation was.
No, I couldn't find much about him. It was always about her.
Yeah, and like you said, she was she was coming up with inventions for her clients, and I'm sure you get into that. I mean, I could right now. There was like a latex collar that she developed for a woman with muscular dystrophy, and she had a wooden pulley-operated feeding tower for a man that needed to eat while standing. Like she was not just an occupational therapist, not going through the motions. She was, actively trying to invent things to make life easier for her clients.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it was just like, if you're a master of that trade or that craft, that's kind of what it would turn into. So she did it her whole life, and she was good at it and uber reliable. And I think that's why the gentleman showed up at the home to check on her when she didn't show up for work. I don't know if he called her house and couldn't get her or whatever, but her not showing up at work was enough to justify going there and checking on her. And that kind of says something. Like, if I didn't show up somewhere, I may get a text, but
right.
I don't think anyone's coming to my house.
Right. No, if I disappeared, I'd be dead for 15 days in my studio. I have kids, so maybe they come and check on me, right? But I mean, it's not the same. If I went back to like my working days when I didn't have kids and all that, and people that relied on me, definitely no one would check on me right away. So yeah, no, it does say something, because her coworker came and checked on her fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was the next. It wasn't even like the afternoon. I think it was the morning that he showed up to look in on her. But regardless, very quickly after word spread that we're looking for the vehicle was found, but not much was said publicly about what that pointed to as far as an investigation goes. However, behind the scenes, a suspect was identified around this time. We'll only learn about this when the case eventually goes to trial, but I guess following the narrative we're telling, it would make sense to tell this story now. But basically, a young Asian male was identified as a suspect as a result of a purchase he made in Canadian Tire shortly before the murders. He basically purchased a very specific hat. I think it says Canada on it and has a maple leaf. He bought a pair of gloves and a hatchet. Coincidentally, that same hat was found with blood on it under the kitchen table. And that hatchet that was purchased, the same kind of make and model or whatever, was found on the front lawn. So it was pretty obvious that this Asian man buying this stuff was connected to the crime. At least if he wasn't, it would be a huge coincidence. When you see pictures of the hat, it's not a typical hat you would see somewhere.
Right.
So anyway, it wasn't the kind of thing where they put it out in the press, like with photos of him, like we're looking for this guy. This all seemed to be happening behind the scenes, that the police were collecting CCTV video from, Canadian Tire in this case, but all over the place. And by the time they find who they suspect to be the young man making that purchase in Canadian Tire, they already have CCTV video of basically everything that happened outside of the home with the drop-off of the vehicle and everything else. So I guess what comes next in the story is we're going to get to the arrest.
Some sense of relief in Marpole now that a suspect is behind bars. 25-year-old Rocky Rambo Wei Nam now charged with second-degree murder in the deaths of Dianna Mah-Jones and Richard Jones. The couple in their 60s killed 6 weeks ago in their home on 64th near Hudson. A police source says a hatchet was found on the lawn, and what was found inside had never been seen by first responders who needed help to cope with what they witnessed. The motive of the double murder, we still don't know.
Cam is a Canadian citizen who was born in Hong Kong, and he had immigrated to Canada with his family as a teenager. In Hong Kong, he had trouble in elementary school and developed little in the way of a social life. A thing to note here, and this will become important later, is that he began gaming at a young age, kind of escaping from his troubles socially into the world of gaming.
Yeah, and his family, it seems like he was kind of raised in a family where I'm expecting, I don't know for sure, but I don't believe his parents were around a lot. His dad apparently was an engineer who was never really around, and his mother worked as both an accountant and as a teacher. And in the interrogation, we hear Rocky Rambo describe his family, and he didn't have much positive things to say about either of his parents. He didn't even know what kind of engineer his dad was, and he described his mom as fake. And basically, when the investigator or the interrogator pushed him on it, what do you mean by fake? He basically summed it up with, like, she wanted me to do things that I didn't agree with.
Yeah.
So I guess reading between the lines, I can tell he didn't seem to have a good home life. And I guess maybe that makes sense why he retreated in video games. He had some siblings. He was the middle child of three. And at one point he'd lived with his brother in Calgary. And it was at that point he was educated. Rocky Rambo has a degree in economics from the University of Calgary. However, I'm kind of surprised he passed, because what I've learned and what I've read about his time in Calgary and his time in university was really when his interest in video games and kind of his second life within the world of the video games that he was interested in really intensified. He was apparently spending 10 to 14 hours a day playing video games, which is pretty intense.
Yeah, that's all day.
Yeah, and that'll become, like, as we get through deeper into the story, video games will keep coming up, and that's kind of why I'm talking about it now, just so people can kind of follow along with it. But basically, to put it in perspective here, as far as the timeline, Rocky Rambo, he moved from Calgary, where he was living near his brother, to Vancouver only 3 months prior to these killings, and he had no real reason to even be in Vancouver. I
think that I caught a reason in watching that long interrogation tape was that maybe a small reason was that in Calgary, he didn't have a vehicle. And in Vancouver, you can walk around. He says this at one point. You can walk around and get pretty much whatever you need, and they have a better bus system. It just was like a more convenient place, an easier place to live. You'll find this with Rocky Rambo, which I should say right now, I don't believe that was his legal. He didn't make that his legal name. It's kind of like, I have a neighbor from the Philippines, and when I introduced myself to him, he said his name was Fred. And I was like, dude, there's no way your name's Fred. I call him Mr. Flintstone now. We're buddies, right?
And I read that as well, but I've also read that his dad was a huge Sylvester Stallone fan and gave him that name.
What's your date of birth, Rocky?
1992, August 2nd.
Okay, and your full name, Rocky Rambo Wei Nam Cam.
Yes.
Yeah, you're laughing. Why are you laughing?
I don't like that.
Oh. You don't like all of the names or some of the names?
Rocky Rambo. Do you know Rocky Rambo?
Well, I know a Rocky Rambo, yeah.
You look like Rocky Rambo, do you?
Not much, no. Is that well, that's obviously the name that your parents gave you.
Yeah.
Basically, what we do know for sure is that he had an incredible interest in video games that was all-consuming, and that he had no real ties to Vancouver, be it friends or family, at the time that this crime occurred, and that he's accused of being involved in it. Yeah. And that's really where we're at when we get to the interrogation. And the interrogation, you've already mentioned it, it's a 9-hour-long interrogation that is at times very hard to watch, because I feel like Rocky Rambo maintained composure where the interrogator didn't. The interrogator seemed like sincerely upset. She was grilling him and was all over him. If anything, he was just kind of annoyed by her, but she seemed like she was kind of losing her cool more than once. Where in the initial interrogation, he denied any involvement, denied having ever seen them, denied ever knowing them, despite the fact that the interrogator's presenting him with evidence basically saying, we have your DNA on the scene, her blood is on your glasses, and on Rocky's glasses. So they had, there's no question. I think she told him there's a 1 in 650 million chance that it isn't you. And that was there. Yeah. And he denied it, but anyway, what were your thoughts? Because I know you watched a lot of the interrogation.
Yeah, well, I'll go back a little bit here on this because with the surveillance tape from the Canadian Tire, watching his movements within that, when I was a kid, because I would steal when I was like, 10 years old, 12 years old. And if you steal something, you kind of walk around too long and you're probably going to get caught because you're like a little bit nervous. That's the way he was walking around. It was very childish. And he's picking up a hatchet, some gloves, and a hat. It's like, okay, come on, Rocky, what else you got? You got a shovel, 3-hole balaclava. Mm-hmm. Like it's really crazy what he's picking up. He's very immature. And so to answer your question, when it came to the interrogation, what I took from him was this. You remember with Making a Murderer, Stephen Avery's apparent co-conspirator, what was his name was like Brendan?
Brendan Dassey.
Thank you. So he reminds me of Brendan. Remember when Brendan says, Mom, am I going to be home for WrestleMania next weekend? After he admitted to murder, he struck me as like that type. He doesn't really understand the enormity of the situation that he's involved in. He strikes me as the type of kid that his mom still needs to tell him to brush his teeth, and he just wets his toothbrush to appease her when she goes to check. Like he's very innocent seeming, and to your point, I didn't feel like the interrogator, she was trying to build rapport with him, but really wasn't getting to his level. She was more
not at all
mothering him, and that's a turnoff for a guy like this who has already said he felt his mother was fake, right? She was really making him clam up, and he continues to say, I don't want to talk about it, over and over again. We're talking about a 9-hour interrogation, and the guy for the main part, the only thing he says is he wouldn't mind having a chicken sandwich when she brings it up, right?
One thing he did talk about, which surprised me, is, well, for one, like the things that surprised me about it was when he did talk, he laughed at the end of like every sentence, but it wasn't really this like maniacal laughter. It was more just kind of this nervous energy he had. He seemed really like awkward and shy, and he was almost like trying to be like polite and pleasant with her, but And he was trying to explain to her, like, I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah.
And then she would drill harder. But what he did say, he said something like, I guess I just would want to play video games, like, or apps on my phone.
Well, what else are you worried about there at the house?
I don't think anyone like someone search your room, right?
Yeah.
That's not very pleasant.
Is there any reason why we'll find anything in your house with regard to these people?
No, I don't think so.
No?
That I could be sure.
Okay. I can see that gives you some stress, Rocky.
Of course it is.
Can I relieve that stress for you at all?
No, I don't think so.
No. Okay.
If there's a way, don't search my room, but you surely wouldn't do that.
Yeah, they're going to do that, I'm afraid.
So,
they are.
so what?
But I don't know. Sometimes we can alleviate stress. Sometimes people have pets, or they have letters they want to go off to certain people, or they want to save certain things for certain people. And so, if there is anything...
Yeah, that's the way to relieve my stress. Give me my phone.
You want your phone?
I want to play video games, play apps.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. I'm sure you wouldn't do it, but I just I need to do something in the game, online game.
Oh.
So with my friend.
His mindset, I can't imagine what he was thinking. It's one of the things that make this case so bizarre. I took the for people who are interested, I have the full interrogation video, and I kind of remastered the audio so you can really hear it well. I'm gonna put it up on my YouTube for anyone who wants to listen. It's tough to get through, but I find it fascinating to skim through it and just kind of see how it evolves. And again, her like you said, her approach I think was way off. If I met him, I feel like within a couple minutes I would realize what kind of approach I'd have to take. And it would have been, I don't know why they didn't give him a phone or something and get him comfortable.
Calm him down a little bit. Yeah, exactly.
I think he was telling them what he needed to be won over, and it was like they wanted nothing to do with it because it was unconventional to stoop down to the level of like, a millennial wanting to play a video game sort of thing.
Like you just said, though, I think they should have. I mean, I worked in schools where you would get kids who can't focus. And if you talk to them directly, you might as well have like one of those from the old detective movies in a smoky room with a light bulb hanging above their head like it's like this is an interrogation, but like they clamp up. So speaking to like just kind of kids in schools that I've dealt with. And what you need to do is kind of distract them with something they enjoy and then interject and you kind of tease it out of them. There was really none of that going on. I mean, the offer was for a chicken sandwich and he kind of laughed that off. He was like, this is, what are you going to, you're not going to get anything out of me for a chicken sandwich, lady.
Yeah, it was a complete waste of time because they really didn't get much out of him. But anyway, at the point that he's arrested, as you said, it was initially with 2 counts of second-degree murder. The public would know very shortly after that things were even worse than they seemed initially. His charges, before it went to trial, were upgraded to first-degree murder. We learned during the trial why that happened. Basically, the prosecution felt that he prepared for the attack far in advance, and I think it was due to internet searches. Apparently, when they searched his home or his apartment and went through his stuff, on his internet history, he had searched Google searches related to crime scene cleanup, tasers, what drugs would knock people out. Yeah. So it looked like he was planning something. Mm-hmm. His defense was that these searches were related to comic books that he was reading.
Yeah, that's pretty weak.
And again, it's a pretty weak defense. I don't know a lot of comic books that get into this, although I know comic books get pretty dark, but it just seems pretty convenient that he was searching this stuff, randomly bought a knife and a hatchet for no apparent reason, and then had his blood on a crime scene. Like there's no question that this is a slam dunk case against him, but ultimately what the trial and what the whole case is going to hinge on is the defense's case is basically that his obsession with video games was so intense that he actually thought he was in a video game and was suffering some kind of mental disorder at the time of the murder that basically detached him from reality and let him kind of act the way he would in a video game, which
Right.
is a pretty unique defense.
It is, and it's extremely unique. Like they're really reaching here when you watch the interrogation tapes, this 9-hour thing. He doesn't mention that once. When she's asking him why'd you do this? Why, it could have been pretty easy for him to say right there. I don't know how I did it. Like they keep on saying that he doesn't show any remorse for what he did. That's fine if you're going to go with this defense. But if I murdered 2 people and I don't have any recollection of it, and I'm thinking maybe I was in this gaming consciousness, I would still feel some remorse that 2 people are dead at my hands, And he never speaks about thinking he was in Skyrim or these other games that he talks about later on here.
Yeah, and it gets pretty weird in the trial when it gets into the gaming stuff. So basically, in the opening statement, so when the trial begins, of course, he's pled not guilty to the 2 counts of first-degree murder. The Crown basically starts the whole thing off promising that they will prove that the hatchet and the knife found at the scene were used by him to kill the couple, that his DNA was found under the female, Dianna Mah-Jones' fingernails, and that her DNA was found on his glasses. So, if they can prove that, that's a pretty good case. They also claim that the crimes were premeditated for the reason that I described, those internet searches, but also because he bought the weapons well in advance, and that he actually, when they pieced together kind of the timeline of what happened using all the CCTV footage that they got, it appeared that he was in the house in hiding when they arrived, which again is a sign of premeditation. So the Crown's belief is that his motive, quite simply, is that he wanted to experience killing someone, and they claim that in their case they're going to be able to prove that. And that's really where the trial starts. Now, the kind of the evidence, the way they presented it was in sections, and I think it was a really good argument to support their case the way they presented it. They start with the DNA evidence against him, which again they mentioned in their opening statements, and I just alluded to there, is that Cam's DNA was found on one of the knives, which was the knife that was purchased at Canadian Tire. So that connects him with the purchase at Canadian Tire and the crime scene. There's a 630 quintillion chance that it's anyone else's DNA. Dianna Mah-Jones, her blood that was found on his glasses that he wore, it was actually on the inside hinge. So there must have been a lot of blood on the glasses, and he probably washed it off, but left that part within the hinge. Rocky Rambo's DNA was found under her fingernails. Again, she was left in the bathtub with hot water blasting on her for a couple hours. Underneath, so her body was likely washed of a lot of the residue that was left behind, but under her fingernails, she had Rocky Rambo's DNA. And people who spoke to the press said she was she may have been 65, but she was tough and feisty. They say she wouldn't have went down without a fight, and so she likely got a good claw or scratch in on him. But
oh yeah, she definitely did. She was strong. Like she came back from a dance class that night when she came home. She, besides being involved with it's a physical job that she's doing as an occupational therapist, but she was in shape, and obviously she fought for her life.
Yeah, and regardless, that DNA, when you think of a trial when it's a killing someone with your bare hands, you're expecting to see DNA evidence used, and when there isn't any, it's almost like it creates doubt. In this case, not only was the DNA evidence used, but it was it kind of tied the whole thing together because it includes the purchase at Canadian Tire, and it connects, it connects them all together. So it's very solid. They back it up and create their timeline with all the video evidence. So again, the investigation early on, what they must have done was just scoured the neighborhood and its businesses and got every bit of CCTV footage. What they present in court during this trial is almost like a scrapbook of little pieces of video that show every aspect of it, I'll just kind of walk through what they displayed during the trial, and you jump in if you need to, or if you have anything you want to add. But basically, the night of the murders, the video starts with a man they believe to be Rocky Rambo. This is just before 6 o'clock. He's basically roaming around the streets, so they see him just crossing random intersections. I think it was video from buses. I guess buses have cameras, so it's just random short clips of him just like walking around. Next video is Mr. Jones using his walker in a liquor store. This is about 6:15. Shortly after, about 15 minutes later, he's walking from the liquor store towards his home. So we see the video of that. And he is an old, fragile man, very slowly and carefully making his way down the road. Next, we see about a half hour later, Dianna Mah-Jones. She's leaving her dance class. About a half hour after that, she's at a Costco. It's now 7:30. Next, we bounce back to Rocky Rambo walking. Again, a bus catches him. He's walking very near this house, the house where the crime took place, at about 8 o'clock. So about a half hour after she was at Costco. The next video is about a half hour after that. It's now 8:38 p.m. And basically, we see a white vehicle pull up and stop on the side of a street, and a guy get out of the street and walk off. And that's their vehicle. And they believe that's Rocky Rambo walking away. So when you look at all of these kind of clips in order, basically we see them going about their day, him roaming around aimlessly. And following the timeline, she would be showing up after he was in that area. So it's likely that he got inside the home, was alone with the disabled 68-year-old Richard Jones, likely ended her life and his life, and I'm thinking she probably walked in as that was happening or after it went down. Okay. That's kind of the way I see that. The way I see that going.
Yeah, that's strange to me because that's how the Crown is presenting it, and I understand why you're saying that as well. But we'll get into it a little bit later on. But he doesn't claim that's the way it went down. Mm-hmm. He says that he came across her as she was unloading her groceries and then kind of like followed her into the house, is the way that I understood it. And murdered her with a slice across the throat once she got inside, and then heard her husband coming, hid, and stabbed him multiple times. Here's what I stop me if I'm getting ahead here, Jordan.
The only thing is we should just say is that during the interrogation, he denied any involvement. However, in the trial, he'll take the stand and tell the whole story. And this is his version that you're describing now.
Perfect. So yeah, to go along with what I'm saying here is the way I see it, he's roaming around. He might have spotted her previously in my mind. Some of this video footage, not only from buses, but from houses that have security footage too. So we see Rocky Rambo kind of walking around the area leading up to this. I believe from what he says later on in trial, and what you just spoke about, I think is what they were assuming before he went to trial. I'm not sure about that. But I believe he came across her, saw her as a really good potential victim, and pushed her into the house and murdered her and her husband. She is of Asian descent as well, right? Yes. And there's a thought that it's possible that she reminded him of his own mother, who he's described before as fake, and kind of set him off. He was fantasizing, obviously, to this point, and he took advantage of an opportune situation. But continue. We'll get into the trial, and we will talk about all that, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, really, it's like what we see here is two rival stories. So his defense, will eventually put him on the stand, and he will bluntly and flatly tell his story. The prosecutors believe it was this premeditated attack. He was in the home before they showed up and did these things, where his version and the defense's version is a different story. So I don't know, the truth is going to be somewhere in the middle. So there's two competing theories. One is him having a premeditated plan, and the other is his story. Now, people hearing this and thinking about him addicted to video games and having this senseless, brutal murder would think there could be chances of, mental illness being at play. The trial was actually stopped for several months before he took the stand to allow a full mental fitness kind of examination to happen. Not much kind of came out of it. They basically, Rocky Rambo's representation requested a delay in the trial to do these kind of tests or whatever it is they went about doing on him. And then after a period of time, the case just ended up back in the court with him being, on the stand and hearing his confession.
Rocky Rambo Wei Nam was soft-spoken. He appeared unemotional, his evidence a matter of fact. Cam told the court he was walking down the street September 26, 2017, when he saw Dianna Mah-Jones taking groceries out of her car. He said he pulled out his hatchet and a pocket knife while hiding behind a tree. I ran to the door. I believe she tried to close the door, but then I tried to bust my way in using force. As soon as Mr. Jones walked into kitchen, I stab him. I just keep stabbing him. It goes on for a while. Thought in my head, how come he didn't die? When he tried to stand up, I'm not sure if I stab him or push him to floor. Go to living room, pick up hatchet. I use hatchet and chopped him on the neck. Cam admitted he bought a hatchet and other items from Canadian Tire, but he's unclear why. After dragging Mah-Jones to the kitchen where her husband was, Cam said he tied the legs of both victims to a chair. Again, he can't explain why. After cutting the twine, Cam testified he dragged the couple to the bathroom and put the bodies in the shower stall. After the killings, Cam told the court he was thirsty. He opened up the fridge, drank some milk, and ate a peach. He grabbed $30, keys, a wallet, and some bananas before leaving. Cam drove off in a car, went home, and had a shower. He dumped his bloody clothes and shoes in the garbage bin behind his house on Granville Street.
I think he's telling the truth on how this all went about, and I don't see how this helps him anyway. Maybe the defense is thinking, you know what, he gets triggered, and he goes into this gaming consciousness mode where he doesn't know what's going on. He follows her into the house, and all these things happen. That's the only thing I can see. The reason I believe he's already killed them both, and he drags them, or at least they're very close to death at this point, drags them to chairs and ties their legs to a chair, and actually couldn't explain. I think probably, in my mind, what it is that he had a plan. This fantasy was a plan. That was part of the fantasy, and it kind of went out of order. And his plan at some point was to have them tied to a chair. So he did it, but it didn't fit at that point. It was unnecessary, so he untied them. That's what happens in my head. Like, these guys always have a fantasy, and of course this hasn't all played out, and we'll never really know the truth from this guy because he can, he won't give you anything in this 9-hour interrogation. All he talks about is a chicken sandwich. It's hard to, but in my mind, it was part of the fantasy that he wanted to implement, whether it was in order or not. That's all I can see.
That makes sense. I could see that. Regardless, he takes him to the shower, leaves him there. But he does something odd before he leaves, and I know you have something to say. Why don't you talk about after he lays their body in the shower, before he leaves the home, he goes to the kitchen, and he tells the story on the stand, and he basically eats a bunch of their food.
Yeah, he sits down, he says he's like super thirsty. So he drinks a glass of milk, and he eats a peach before leaving the crime scene. And this rang a bell with me because BTK would do this after murdering people. I believe, there's quite a few people that did this. Serial killers, murderers that talk about sitting down and drinking and eating out of their fridge. Joseph D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer, many names, right? The original Night Stalker being the main one, would do the same thing. Besides it, for a guy like BTK, it became part of his ritual. He would even offer, I think he believed, Nancy Fox, he offered her a glass of water beforehand. But the reason why, when you look into it, is like when you have an adrenaline rush, your salival glands shut off and you start breathing out of your mouth. It's natural for a human being to breathe out of your nose. You're supposed to breathe through your nose. You start when this adrenal, kick, you're breathing out of your mouth, and it makes your throat dry, and your saliva glands aren't working. It's all pushing towards adrenaline, and you're super thirsty afterwards. And, that is, that's probably what happened with him here. That's why he sat down and had a glass of milk. Super thirsty because of the extreme situation he had just been through.
Yeah, when you hear him like drinking milk and eating a banana and a peach, and I think he took $30 for some reason before he left in their car.
Yes.
When you hear that, it sounds so bizarre, but at the same time, I can almost picture him just like absolutely gasping for breath. Like he's been sitting in this crappy apartment playing video games for, the last several years. He definitely wasn't in the condition to be dragging people around.
No, and again, I'll go back to this. This play, what you just said right there, plays into my opinion that his story is true. That he wasn't in the house when she came in. I believe he took care of the stronger one first, which would be Dianna Mah-Jones, because her injuries are just a big slice across the throat and a carotid artery being sliced, right? Mm-hmm. So she's kind of out right away, and then he easily takes over Richard Jones, who's in a walker, and he stabs him 103 times. He's an easy target because of what they say is that he has a disability, I guess. That really plays to me as the true way that this went down. Because if he's waiting in the house, he's on a one-on-one battle with Dianna. I think that he's at a disadvantage face-to-face at the door. If he follows her into the house, he's got her back, and he slices her throat, and he's on top.
I think people were surprised that he took the stand, he went and allowed himself to tell the story, because it comes across as brutal and very cold hearing him tell, but it's a part of the defense's plan where they basically want to show him as being this kind of like socially awkward, isolated kind of guy who did like kind of a pointless crime that made no sense. And they get into then explaining their theory, which is, you've said it a few times, is they created almost a mental illness referred to. They came up with something called gaming conscience, which is basically when you think you're in a game or a video game and are basically acting out a fantasy is disconnected from reality.
Defense counsel Glenn Orris told the court Cam suffered from a mental disorder at the time of the killings. He thought he was in a video game, and within the game, he attacked and killed the couple. Defense says Cam has no prior history of violence. I believe the evidence will show no motive, no prior connection between Cam and the victims. He's unable to explain why he did these acts. There does not appear to be logical explanations for what he did in the house outside of a game. Cam, who has an economics degree from Calgary, said at one point he was gaming 12 to 13 hours a day.
I was reading a lot of the articles thinking, like, I don't know a lot about psychology or whatever. I thought gaming conscious must have been like something, but apparently, it was like they even asked him, like, is this like a condition? And the doctor's like, no, these are just like my own words. Like it's not something that's studied or exists. That's just the term they gave for Rocky Rambo thinking he's in a video game. And and this really bothered me.
They made it up.
Yeah, they basically made it up. And the video game he was playing a lot was Skyrim. And oddly, like, I'm not a big gamer or anything, but one game I played for hours and hours is Skyrim, and that is
I played it too.
Yeah, that's not a violent video game. It's violent like Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings.
Let me ask you this, Jordan. Do you remember a part in Skyrim where you tie people to a chair?
No, not necessarily. I don't recall.
No. Well, that was part of his deal, right? If he's in a game and he's tying people to a chair and it's a big part of his fantasy, where's he getting that from?
Oh, okay.
I mean,
you're saying because that doesn't happen in the game.
No, and it's something on his own. It's his own deal.
Okay,
like this is a murder. that happened.
I was waiting for you to tell me about some subplot I don't remember from Skyrim that like mirrors this crime. I was gonna think I would have been shocked because the game is more about exploring these like abandoned ruins and fighting skeletons that are that are hiding or that are cursed to guard this treasure. And what they did at one point. Now I wish I could see video of this. I've only read about it, but his lawyer demonstrated Skyrim. So his lawyer basically is playing a video game on a TV in the courtroom, showing people like how violent Skyrim is. And the lawyer is just like going around like attacking people. And, when you play a game like Skyrim, like these kind of role-playing games, you can kind of roam around cities and interact with people and, and uncover these little side quests and secrets. But you can also like pull out your sword and like hit them. And then, all the people in the town will attack you. And it's just like it's this dumb thing. But he was kind of showing that it's this violent game where you can just attack people. And then he asked like Rocky to describe what he was doing. And Rocky basically said like, you had a hard time killing that person because your character wasn't leveled up and didn't have strong weapons. And it just seems like thinking about it, it must have been just such a bizarre scene to play out in the courtroom.
You know what I was wondering when I heard about all this, I'm like, well, it's too bad he wasn't into Mario Brothers because all he'd have is like a sore head from banging his head out bricks, hoping a mushroom would fall out, or jumping off of rooftops and grabbing on the flagpoles to make the level end. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's there. I don't put much when I think of this. Well, we'll get with our thoughts on the case. Basically, in the end, after they present their case that he thought he was in a video game. When questioned why during the interrogation did none of this stuff came up, their answer to that is he thought he was in a video game and had this gaming conscience during the interrogation as well, and that's why he acted the way he did in that. Because that's a big kind of problem with the theory that he thought he was in a game. Why would he then during the interrogation, be the way he was? But yeah. The thing with the gaming consciousness thing as well is I believe that the judge and everybody feels the same way that we do. It's ridiculous, but they had to accept it, in my opinion, and other people's opinion as well from what I read, is that you have to accept it because if you don't, then later on it could be grounds for an appeal where you could get a new trial with that implemented, right? So you don't want to give them a second chance. So let's get this stupid theory out of the way and knock it smash it to the ground right now, so that it doesn't come back to haunt us later in the court system. Mm-hmm. So upon cross-examination, when the Crown goes after him, they're basically asking him, if you didn't plan to kill someone, why were you roaming around with a hatchet, 2 knives, a glove, and a baseball bat? They asked him that on the stand, and his response was he kind of chuckled, and he said, and shampoo. Because apparently in his backpack he had shampoo, but he kind of giggled and the Crown kind of challenged him like, that's not like, do you think this is funny? Because he kind of chuckled after he said like, and shampoo. But my thing when I heard that is like, does he not realize that, if you were planning to kill someone, maybe you'd want to wash up afterwards and maybe it would make sense to have shampoo. Like I thought, the shampoo, almost when he listed the stuff, why didn't he say you had a hat, a knife, a hatchet, and shampoo? Like, what the heck was he planning to do? That's a good point. I never thought about that. I as well thought it was a kind of a funny thing. I understood why he was laughing at it. He actually replies to them after the Crown says, "Is this funny to you?" He says, "No, it's not funny. I don't understand why you keep suggesting otherwise." Yeah, which is a strange thing to say.
Yeah, well, I can picture that from the interrogation video. Like, just the way he acts there, he was so matter-of-fact and cold. The way he was answering the questions of the interrogator during the interrogation, at one of this super heated moment, she's like leaning over the table, like, you murdered these people and we know you did it. He interrupts her by saying, how old are you? And the interrogator's like, what? And he's like, what's your age? Mm-hmm. And she answers it, and he asks how long she's been a cop. And it's just like this bizarre little interaction. And this is this is kind of like that. And, I could just picture the way he says something and then he just has this kind of awkward laugh at the end of every sentence. So,
yeah, he is socially awkward. I mean, it's documented through his entire life. That's why he's kind of going into this world. They say escaping into this world, but it's more like just immersing into a world that he can understand, in my mind. I mean, I have a lot of friends who play a lot of video games. We all do. My kids love them too. It's not so much just getting away from reality. It's stepping into another one with a new perspective, and it's kind of nice to be somebody else, especially for a guy like this.
Yeah, it's also a big distraction. If you're not happy
Yes.
with your life and you're miserable and your parents are on your case about getting a job and you have all this pressure, you can turn on Skyrim and all of a sudden you're like, in another world where your problems have no relevance and you have 1,000 things you got to do to save the world, and you just find yourself, just like that. That's what I like about video games. It's some people get lost in alcohol or drugs and they forget about their job and their problems with that. Video games can do the same thing, but also, like we see in Rocky Rambo's story, you can get lost in them too, just like you can in, scratch tickets or whatever else, whatever other vice you find. But at this point in the story, where we're at now is basically present day. Like, what's happened is shortly after this cross-examination, the judge announces that they'll deliver a verdict on April 3rd. So we're recording this late February. So we're over a month out from this verdict coming through.
Rocky Rambo Wei Nam Kam, now 27, displayed a complete lack of empathy, Crown said, in the final day of closing arguments. Mulligan told the court Kam has not been diagnosed with a mental or internet gaming disorder, adding the murders were carried out in a controlled and methodical manner, planned and deliberate with execution-style injury. Therefore, Kam should be convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Kam had been consumed by violent video games for much of his life. Defense counsel Glenn Orris says Kam thought he was in a video game when he slashed Jones, 68, who used a walker more than 100 times, and cut the throat of Mah-Jones, 64, in the couple's home in September 2017. On Tuesday, defense closed its case, saying the appropriate verdict is manslaughter because Crown has not proven murder beyond a reasonable doubt. Madam Justice Giroux will deliver her verdict on April 3rd.
I wasn't there in the courtroom, but I am definitely leaning towards a guilty verdict in this case. Him buying the stuff in advance, that is just too much for me. That alone, that shows premeditation.
The thing for me is if he's lost in a video game, when he's buying the hatchet and all that stuff, the gloves and all that from the Canadian Tire, obviously he's planning for this. Is he not in that gaming consciousness state right there? Why isn't he just hatcheting people out in the parking lot or the cashier? The reason why he's not doing it is because it's not a safe spot to do it. It's safe when he's in a house with 2 senior citizens. And that's not a gaming consciousness. That's not out of his mind. That's his fantasy being in a safe place for him to play out.
Yeah,
right.
It's he has privacy in there to do, in their house. He has privacy. They may fight back a little bit, but he's got them.
He's got
where
him.
he wants them to do his thing. Mm-hmm. And there's something he says that to me is very very telling. One of the things he said when on the stand, when being asked, why he did a lot of the things, why did you buy this? Why did you go in the house? One of the things he said was, where is it? He says, like I said, I don't think I killed Mr. and Mrs. Jones. I never feel any feelings. I don't sleep at night. I don't feel guilt or any sadness or happiness. I don't know how to describe it. And to me, that little sentence is kind of describing someone who just has no empathy. And, and if you have no empathy, you're capable of anything.
Right. So you're talking about a sociopath, maybe even a psychopath, right? I mean, that's all he's really saying. Here's the thing with everything, man. It happens too often. See, I'm from the land of Vincent Lee, 45 minutes away from me. I drive past it all the time when I go get groceries in a bigger town near my small town, where the Greyhound bus beheading happened with Vincent Lee, now known as Will Baker. And oftentimes, not just with that case, But with many cases, when mental illness or these excuses like a gaming consciousness comes into play, it's like just because you have an explanation doesn't mean you have an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
And my fear is that we're going to get another excuse in this verdict. I'm all up. I understand that there's mental illness out there and people could be taken over by it and they can commit crazy acts like cutting a kid's head off on a Greyhound bus and eating parts of them and all that. I mean, I guess I understand that. What I hope doesn't happen here is the same thing that kind of happened out here, is that in a decade from now, we're going to learn that Rocky Rambo's back online.
I don't think it's going to turn out that way. I don't see it turning out that way. He reminds me of Rocky Rambo in listening to his interrogation. Now, I don't mean to like reference my own stuff, but did you listen to the episodes that I did where I interviewed Lindsay Suvanaroth?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Some of the things from the interrogation, it reminded me a bit of that. Like, she also was super cold and awkward and was addicted to video games, and like I couldn't help but, as I was listening to this story and watching that interrogation, I couldn't help but seeing a few similarities. Like, I think there are people out there who just have, like, psychopaths or whatnot, where they just have no empathy. Yeah. And they can just go down these crazy dark rabbit holes and pop out every so often and do something like this. Sure. And that's what I think happened. I think this guy knows exactly what he did, and he's just not up for telling anybody how he feels about it. That's my opinion. I think the Crown's got it bang on.
Me too. I hope so. It's a strange world we live in right now. I will. I mean, we're not placing bets here, but we'll talk to each other in about a decade, man. And I think that it won't be what you think it is. I think he'll be out in 10 years. I think that they'll find a way. I hope not.
Yeah. The thing is, though, like, it's tough. No, there's no way around the fact. Like, in my opinion, I think he did it, and I think he knows what he did. But at the same time, I think whatever made him do it and is making him hide it is some kind of illness. And it's a complicated situation on how you deal with that. Just like the bus beheading, that person who did that wasn't making like a logical, strategic decision to do this for their own gain or something. If science and medicine can help those people, and can identify what's going on, it's a very complicated situation. And
it's very much so. But here's, I mean, we could go on forever about this, but my thing with the Vincent Lee situation, with the Greyhound bus beheading, is that a lot of people are paranoid schizophrenics, and a lot of people have voices in their minds, but not everybody. Just the same as people who have bad childhoods and were abused and all that don't all become killers or serial killers. Not all paranoid schizophrenics that walk into the sun thinking God's talking to them end up on a Greyhound bus cutting a kid's head off. My thing is, like, you need to put them in a different category. You don't want to paint the brush that all people with mental illness are capable of murder, obviously, but the ones who have committed murder, let's pay a little bit more attention to them and put some, guidelines in place to make sure they're getting their medication down the line. And for example, with Vincent Lee, from what I've heard and what I've read, he doesn't even need to check in.
That's scary, but it's such a big issue, especially here in Canada, because, like, I get that people with mental illness can fall through the cracks. There's not enough money to look after anybody, let alone the mentally ill. So it's such a complicated, big issue. Like, my opinion is what we should do is raise taxes by like 2 or 3% and put a ton of money into education, the school system, healthcare. I just don't think there's enough money to make everything work. And people have such high expectations from a country like Canada or the United States for the government to be able to manage things. But at the same time, the average person wants tax rates to drop and doesn't want to pay property tax and wants everything convenient and easy. And it's just, you can't have it all. If a government ran on the platform that we're going to raise taxes 3% and every bit of that is going to go towards education and healthcare and looking after the vulnerable and filling these cracks that people fall through, I'd vote for them. And a second thing is, I'm sure a lot of that money would go towards helping people with mental illness who have a risk of harming themselves and others, and and trying to mitigate that. But anyway,
I'm all yeah. It's a long story. I'll wrap up my end with this: is that you have to have the person with the issue come to those services and take advantage of them. If they're hiding in their own mind, like a I keep on thinking in my head, Rocky Raccoon, that Beatles song, Rocky Rambo, or like a Vincent Lee, they have to come to the service. So you have outliers. You have outliers, right? And my thing is, like, if you have these outliers and these people who commit these acts, and sure, mentally ill, whatever you want to call it, you gotta, let's put them in a little bit of a different group, and let's like stay on top of them as time goes on and ensure that this doesn't happen again. I'm all up for second chances and giving people the benefit of the doubt and all that. But at the end of the day, all I can think about is the families of these people and them themselves. Often, you never get to hear the victim side because they're dead. And I know if it was me who walked into the room after having a rum and coke and just heard my wife yelp out and got stabbed 103 times, if I could speak back from the afterlife, I'd be like, hey, could you not give this guy, could you just lock him up at least? Do you see what he did to me?
What just hit me is just it's kind of an interesting thing is we're talking about if there was more money and more resources and services that maybe people like, if Rocky Rambo is in fact mentally ill, maybe people like that would, get better help and better access to care to prevent things like this. But at the same time, think of Dianna Mah-Jones. She was working in kind of that industry to help people. She was probably working for an underfunded kind of department or to a business that was just scraping by. She probably wasn't paid nearly enough for what she was doing. And she was someone who was kind of fighting to make the system work. Again, improvising devices to help these people who had special needs. So it's kind of like the world that we're describing may prevent this. She was almost like helping fight to make that a reality. So it's kind of
very sad.
Yeah, and that way it's connected. And also with her, I bet you she wasn't paid enough. She was probably working her ass off overtime to, meet the demands of her clients. At the same time, then she would leave work, get groceries, and go home to a 68-year-old husband who also needed care. And to end up the victim of a murder that's as pointless and senseless, and then to have your life snuffed out by someone as pathetic as, Rocky Rambo. This is a sad story. And we can talk a lot about the elements that made this happen and that, but at the end of it, it's a very tragic story that could happen to anyone listening's grandparents. It's like they were hit by lightning, except it was much more complicated than that.
Much more.
I want to thank you for joining Jack, Luna, and I for this discussion surrounding the bizarre story of Rocky Rambo Wei Nam Kam. At the time of this episode's recording, we were awaiting sentencing of Rocky Rambo, and I'm now able to give you an update on that side of things. As he was convicted of first-degree murder, a life sentence would be automatic, but the judge would be left with the decision related to parole eligibility and whether or not the sentences would be concurrent. I'm going to play you a short global news piece that provides the judge's decision.
First-degree murder carries an automatic life sentence. The difficult decision for the judge here was concurrent or consecutive sentences for the double murder, 25 or 50 years before parole eligibility.
Did you want to comment at all?
No, thank you.
No?
A painful and devastating journey for justice for the victims' families.
Well, that's not the result we were hoping for.
Crown argued the killer should not be allowed to apply for parole for 50 years. The judge's decision, 25.
So it will be 2042 before he can apply for parole. And as Madam Justice Giroux pointed out, there's no guarantee that he will get parole.
But at least say you're sorry.
For what?
For what?
No motive. We still have no understanding why Rocky Rambo Wei Nam Kam, now 27, randomly attacked two innocent strangers. Dianna Mah-Jones fought for her life as Kam slit her throat. Her husband, Richard Jones, slashed more than 100 times. Crown tried to convince the judge Cam poses a lethal threat to the public.
Well, it's based on the circumstances of the offense, the nature of the crime, and the lack of an explanation for why Mr. Cam committed these murders.
During the trial, defense argued Cam was consumed by violent video games, and he thought he was in a game when he killed the couple. The theory rejected by Madam Justice Giroux. Cam is a university graduate, no prior criminal history or diagnosed mental health issues. While the nature of the crime is extremely troubling and an indication Mr. Cam may continue to represent a threat to society, said the judge, there were no pre-sentence reports or psychological or psychiatric reports that indicate Mr. Cam is incapable of rehabilitation and therefore will be dangerous in 25 years.
Do you think we're ever going to learn the motive?
I honestly don't know. As I mentioned a moment ago, I'm hoping that during the course of his time in custody, through psychiatric counseling and assessments, that the experts will be able to develop an idea of his motive. But at this point, he chose not to share that with us.
Now, as you heard in that clip, there was a lot of differing opinions on what would be appropriate. But my opinion is that without a firm motive or an explanation or real remorse, I think it's probably best to err on the side of harsher sentence. Now, with that said, I'm going to wrap things up, but let me end with some thanks. First, a big thanks to Jack Luna for sharing an evening with me and with you, the listeners of Nighttime. If you want to hear more Jack, I can't recommend his show Dark Topic enough. Do yourself a favor, check Jack Luna out. Next, a big shout to LJ from the Dystopian Simulation Radio podcast, who provides our intro and outro voiceovers, and Monty Data, who provides our theme music. And then lastly, but most importantly, a massive thank you goes out to each and every one of you listening to Nighttime, as without your interest and your support, this show would be as pointless as it would be impossible. On the topic of support, let me thank the newest subscribers to the premium feed, Ryan and Frosty. Thank you for going premium. And for anyone else who'd like to support the show, you can help us out here in a variety of ways. First of all, a premium feed subscription costs just a couple dollars a month, and that money funds the creation of the show. But a premium feed subscription also gives you the episodes 2 days early, gives them to you ad-free, and gives you access to a full back catalog of episodes. You can go premium at patreon.com/nighttimepodcast. And even if you don't want to go premium, you can still support the show by sharing this episode on social media and telling some like-minded friends why they should listen. Your support in growing this is very much appreciated. Now I'm going to wrap it up, but until next time, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let me know if you see anything weird.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte.